I never thought I would sit in this chair and tell you Dain Aetos could get it.
This brings me such immense joy. I am shooketh. I never thought I'd hear it.
I would have never anticipated. Like, you could have told me mere weeks ago, Jordan, by next week you'll be like, Dain is something, and I would have been like, you're a fool. Like, absolutely not. But I would be wrong.
Oh, I know this because I actually went back and listened to our episode on Iron Flame before this.
Don't hold me accountable.
Hated Dain. You said the most strong-worded things about Dain in that episode, and look at where we're at now.
Don't quote me to me. That's a different Jordan.
We're a whole new people now.
I don't even know her.
She doesn't even go here. Well, I agree with you. Dain in this book is like, whew. I did not dislike him in Iron Flame as much as others may have. You. But I mean, I like him a lot more now, too.
And you know what? I'm going to take this one step further and say something kind of controversial.
Wow. Okay.
Without saying any spoilers, right? I'm just going to mention names. Okay. I would venture to say that Dain had the redemption arc that Sarah J. Maas intended for Chaol to have.
Oh, yeah. Like, I agree with you.
This is how I think Sarah J. Maas wanted us to feel about Chaol. That just, like, maybe some people it stuck for, but, like, a good chunk of people just did not stick for. But, like, Rebecca wrote it. Rebecca wrote that redemption arc, and she did it well.
I also watched this video online where she said Dain is her favorite character.
Yes.
So I was like, wow, she did him justice. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
I was just like, oh, sir. My eyes are on you.
That was hot. I was like, okay,
right?
Dain.
Right? Oh my God. He had some lines,
not so
dude.
vanilla. Yeah, he had some lines.
Or like, okay, low key, I don't know, this might be too early to already be here, but it's like, it's giving some foreshadowing of what type of what's the right phrase I'm going to use here?
Of a lover?
Yes. I can't say that with a straight face.
I thought the same things. I was like, are we Cassian in it right now?
Like, you know, he calls her a good girl.
Oh, you know that he has some things to say, I think.
And she's confirmed he has a headboard, so.
Yes. Confirmed to have a headboard.
Just saying. It's giving put together. It's giving praise.
That it is. If we don't get to see that in book 4 or 5 and beyond, like if we miss out on that, I will.
On a POV. Oh yeah. You're gonna need a dream wander, Violet, if that's what I have to get.
Be like, this is where you're going first. And if we get a POV, it better be his partner's POV.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I don't want his POV.
No.
Well, maybe. But maybe. I mean, no. We got to read about it from you know, his partner in crime, so to speak.
I hope she does. I really do. Actually, now that you've said that, it'd be really cool if we move into like Throne of Glass territory where we start splitting up POVs as we go on, where it goes from like one to multiple. That would be so cool. I would love to see that.
Me too. They could do it a little bit at the end of Onyx Storm.
True.
Like
but I feel like they do at the end of. Didn't they do that same thing at the end of Iron Flame too?
I think so. Same thing, like last couple chapters, not throughout, more or less.
Okay. You want to get into it?
Let's do it.
Okay. I'm Jordan.
I'm Sheridan.
And together we're Sipping on Spice podcast.
Yes. And today we are so insanely excited to talk about the amazing book that is Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. This is going to be part 1 of 2 episodes. So we're in part 1 today, but we are just so excited to talk about this book. It is fantastic.
Yes, we initially intended to make this one episode, but we met up and we realized how many notes we had, and we were like, well, we've got a lot of theories, a lot of things to, I feel like, talk about in depth. So we wanted to do it justice and not speed through it. So
agreed.
It had to be 2.
And our thoughts do get a little unhinged, and we treat this like a girls' night. So you might want to grab your favorite beverage because we're going to be diving into quite a few topics today. Yes. We're going to be going over a lot.
Yes. Okay. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. So here's what I'm going to tell you. I think it's important to preface this note with, before I dove into Onyx Storm, so we read FourthWing and Iron Flame, what, like 4 months ago, 5 months ago?
Yeah, the summertime.
Okay, so it's been a while. I was able to reread FourthWing before Onyx Storm. I read Onyx Storm, went back and reread Iron Flame, and then reread Onyx Storm again. So
nice.
The dedication was there. Okay. The dedication was there. But I will say at the beginning, like one of my first notes is, where did all these people come from?
Yes. All these names. I'm like, who are you? Like, what? I don't remember you.
I felt like Jack in the Nightmare Before Christmas. Like, what's this? What's this? There's people everywhere.
There literally is people everywhere. So many people. I'm like, who are they? Where did they come from?
Well, and they would switch from like the writer's first name to last name. I don't know.
Yes.
The last name is where it started to get tricky, right?
Mm-hmm.
The last names, the royalty, and then they would start whipping out Griffin's names. And I was like when Arik lands on the battle or lands on the flight ground and like replaces Halden, I was like, and they just say like, oh, they see his dragon incoming, and they say his dragon's name. I was like, what's that?
I think I think Rebecca did that a lot more in this book of calling out like the dragon communication, name of dragons. So I wrote down on a post-it note all of the main dragons' names, and they're also similar. Like, and I'm gonna butcher them, but there's Cure, there's like Cod. Like, I'm gonna butcher these pronunciations, but
we're not audiobook girlies.
We're not. We're not. I don't know how they.
This is all from the mind of Sheridan.
Yes. So I have Kier and I have Curd. And
Curd. She's Curd.
I bet that's not how it's pronounced. But I wrote them on a like post-it note because I could not keep up with them.
Yeah, I would reference her thing at the beginning. The other thing I think is important to note is like, I'm bad at geography in real life. Like in real life, like it is known through all the people who know me that I'm just terrible at geography. There's something about it that just does not click in my brain the same way that it does for everybody else. It does not matter how much I look at a map or like try. It's like, it just does not like compute. So especially as they would talk about things, I would just like flip back to the map again. Like, hang on, where that be? Like at one point in time I had to Google like where Cravali was, because it's a part of a thing. So it's not on the map. So you had to like, you know what I mean? So like some of those things like just took me a little bit longer to like go back and forth between to make sure I was comprehending what they were trying to sell me.
No, I totally agree. I had to Google. I'm not proud of how many times I had to Google what Poromail was or where it was or what did you just I did. Well, okay, this is also, okay, I'm going to show off, I guess, like how weird I am. Whenever I look at, this doesn't describe anything to me. I can look at this map and like my mind is like, I'm like, great. Can I have some names of people? Like, can I have a legend? Can I know what I'm looking at? Because it's like, yeah, that's the location on the map.
There you are.
But who's from there? What do they do?
What kind of peoples do you house?
Exactly. So I had to Google it because I was like, yeah, I see it's over here, but what does that mean?
Yeah. I will say, like, when I went back and reread Iron Flame and then Onyx Storm, it was easier, but it's still just, like I said, I still just think, like, with the way my brain works, and it sounds like the way your brain works, it did take a little bit more research.
Yes, especially when we get to the Isles part, I had to really, like, relook at that and... Like,
I did like that they were represented by gods, though. That was the only way that like that helped it click for me, where I was like, oh yeah, like I might not remember the Isle name, but I remember what god was represented there.
Makes
you know
sense.
What I mean?
Yes.
So I really appreciated that.
I loved it too, because that almost like for me it was like a mythology almost. So I thought that was really interesting on the Isles. And the gods that were represented there.
Yeah, and I thought it was really cool to see like how the peoples were in like the different trials, and we can get into that. So I have a couple trivial notes for you up first.
Okay.
Which is, at least we didn't do miscommunication.
Very, very true.
Yes.
Much improved.
I will say though, going back and reading Iron Flame and then coming back, I understood it from a different point of view, and I was less annoyed with some of the things that annoyed me when I read Iron Flame first. it's like Onyx Storm gave me a different appreciation of it and understanding of like where she was headed. Because something I really love about her writing is that you can tell she knows where she's going the whole time. Right? Because sometimes you'll read a good book and you'll say, okay, maybe they knew like the first two, and you'll be like, yes, the first two books were fantastic. And by book 3, they might, where it's like, babe, did you know where you were headed, or are we just spitballing here? You know what I mean? And you can tell she knows where she's going. So there was so much more I appreciated about that. And I think gave me a little bit more.
Like just like understanding.
Yeah. But I will say one of the things I loved right away was just the Xaden glow up, and we're not doing miscommunication. We're done with the trust game.
I loved that. Oh, yes, I completely agree. Because that was my biggest gripe with Iron Flame, is the back and forth and the miscommunication. And then also upon my reread of Iron Flame, it still bothered me a little bit, the whole cat storyline being there. And you had a good point when we were talking about it, to show that they are also strong. I wish the Flyers and the Griffins, I wish that we had been shown that the Flyers and the Griffins were shown as being strong characters in a different way. Yeah. But I still like understand where she was coming from. But I agree with you. I think the setup and the journey we go on in Iron Flame upon reread after Onyx Storm makes more sense. And I think it makes it so much sweeter that Xaden and Violet both are like, wow, this is really, I just turned into a venom. This is not great. I've got a lot on my plate now. Now we have a lot in the way. Exactly. This is a bad time. But at no point there's any like, I absolutely loved Violet in this book. That's a huge note I had. I think she is a huge glow up from a confidence in herself perspective. And I think that translated to her relationship with Xaden, because multiple times she was just like, no, we're not doing that. I'm not backing out. I love you. Yeah. I just loved their romance in this book.
I totally agree. I didn't think Xaden could get hotter, but turns out you can.
Right? Oh, I know. He was the tortured, and he was so possessive and jealous, and like all the morally gray for her, but possessive of her. Yes. Just top tier shadow zaddy, as I guess now he's called. Yes.
When he says, when they ask him who his allegiance is to, and he's like, first Violet, second Tyrandor, and then third Navarre when it's deserving. Usually when Violet's in residence, I was like, God, like, right? Okay.
Exactly. Oh my God, no, he was just so perfectly romantic, and he put his like money in his actions where his mouth was. Like he was very flowery, and like these declarations of love. I think I've told you, Xaden is up there on book boyfriends with his declarations of I love you, like throughout the series. But in this book, it's even better. One of my favorite quotes, to your point, is when he talks about his allegiance, when he later on, him and Violet are talking, and he says to her, I have never been afraid of you for Tyrandor, because this is when they're kind of talking about like potential, he has become the Duke, and you know, their potential, what that looks like, you know, from a lineage and all that perspective, and that he's had marriage proposals from other women not, you know, their families. And then he says, I would never be afraid of Tyrandor like for you, but I would do anything to protect you. Like again, he just shows that Violet is his number one. Just it's perfection. When he says how to spell her name, when they're at that, like how, like on the marriage certificate, like when the one
second he said, only a lifetime will do. I was like, God, he's gonna do it.
Yes. And then he's like, there's 2 R's. Like, oh, so good.
No, he says there's only one person I asked for permission from. I was like, oh, he had me set at every turn. I was
Absolutely.
like, and it was perfect for his venom storyline, because like the only thing that like truly angered him and triggered him to wield from the earth or whatever was her, like, it was just the way she used it was just
perfection.
It was so
perfection. Good. Their romance is top tier. They both had a glow up, so their relationship had a glow up. Another thing too that you made me just think of is that I think is really important to the plot. If we dip into theory a little bit, it's really important for the plot that he is a venom, but he's holding on to a piece of his soul because he loves her. He can still love her, so he's not true venom. And even with everything that happens in his book, and the farther and farther, the more he channels, the more he gets in his venom journey, he still loves her. So when they say venoms are incapable of love, that is false. because
Yeah.
he definitely shows he loves her.
And it's interesting, right? It brings up the thought of I feel like one of the biggest theories online that we see all the time is that Brennan and Naolin, right? Naolin was the initial siphon, that he saves Brennan. The only thing they've told us, they've never told us he's dead. They've told us that he what did he say? That it cost him everything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. Do we want to get into this? Because I have multiple points. This is one of my big theories I am ready to dive into.
I'm actually really interested in what you have to say because I've spent time thinking about it, but this is like one of the things that I don't think I've like pieced together enough. The only thing that really jumped out to me is that in that scene, Violet mentions that she doesn't see the relic on Brennan anymore, and she doesn't see it on Dain anymore. But they've both been touched by siphon, so I thought potentially that was just a note to say that they'd been siphoned from or to.
Yes, and Brennan had 2 marks. So one was still remaining after Sloane is able to help remove the mark from Dain when she siphons the power back.
Right.
So yes, so I in caps throughout this whole book, Brennan is shady. Okay. So yes, and I think it is tied to, I fully believe that this theory online, I fully believe he was Neolin's lover, like they were in love. And so he sacrificed everything, lost everything to save Brennan. And that's why Brennan had that mark on him. It's from Neolin.
And it is important to note here that is one of the things that Rebecca Yarros in this book tour has confirmed. She said they asked her if she would say anything about them or tell us any more about Neolin. And she said no, but she did say you would have to really care about somebody to give your life for them.
Absolutely. 1,000%. So yes, they were lovers. Okay. I have multiple points on why he's shady. And I'm not saying shady in the way that I think he's going to harm Violet or Mira physically or anything like that. I just think that he is in cahoots maybe with the Venin, because I do think Neolin is high up in the Venin. And he's alive. So I think that Brennan knows this. And I think that he could still be in communication with Neolin to some degree in future books. Or what I think Rebecca Yarros does so great in these books is I don't think it's going to be kind of like I hate my sisters, I'm going to harm them. I think he is going to sacrifice them potentially or something, sacrifice the cause out of his love for Neolin, just like we would expect Xaden to sacrifice anything for Violet. I think it's from a place of being in love. But I have multiple points on why he's shady.
Okay, the one thing I want to say on that note that I actually think I could see where you're going with this, and I'm interested in your points. We know that, yes, I think that the Theophany, yes, let's go with that. She was a maven, right? Mm-hmm. We know that she was old enough for Violet's mom to be the counterpart to her power, right? So let's call it 20 years at least older, 20, well, because they have to graduate to get married, right? So let's call it 25 years minimum older than Brennan. So I actually think if he's going to be somebody, he's going to be Xaden's sage.
Do you think they're the same person? That Brenwyn? Okay, yes. I could see that happening.
Because we thought we him. We didn't.
And he's alive.
He's alive at the end. Berwyn, that's what it is. Berwyn. Yes. I think that would be him because I think age-wise, we know they're much older. I'm thinking there's a reason he's Xaden's sage, if that's him.
And I totally agree with you. I actually have that as a potential note down below in my other notes.
Yes. Now go into your theories. Because everybody was talking about him being like the leader. I don't think it's possible for him to be the leader just based on his age.
Okay. Yes. I had written down he could be a leader or he is Bernwyn. But he is alive. He is not. And I think that Brennan is shady in this sense because I think he knows this and I think he's in communication with him to some degree, or it's going to be further in more books. Okay. First things first. We're just high level. We're going to get into this, just the most superficial of them. Violet calls out that when Xaden, she's checking in on him, she consistently says after he turned Venin, his eyes became fully amber. And she's constantly checking his eyes are still amber. They're not getting more red, but they became fully amber. Who else has amber eyes? Violet talks about yes. And then she also says, if we tie in a different point, Brennan has her dad's eyes for like a future theory that we can get into as well. Brennan, she calls out, Brennan has always had her dad's eyes. So amber eyes. Other two, superficial, just superficial. the whole dragon thing, the orange dragon, the other people that had orange dragons, Jack Barlow and Varish, not nice people. And then there's also a note that says that they poorly pick writers. They don't pick well, orange dragons. Yes.
Yeah. You were a bad pick, bud.
Exactly. And his dragon's name, and this is a TikTok theory. This I did not read in the book. TikTok theory. It's like Marb. It means death. In something.
Does it?
In TikTok land, it does. But it's like Marb or something. So those are two. I was like, okay, the eyes, that's interesting. But let's talk about his dad. Let's not forget that. And then also the dragons, that was interesting. And then we also kind of talked about my understanding of reading is that Brennan had 2 marks. One was able to be removed by Sloane when I thought that Dain, and then she obviously removes Dain's mark when she's siphoning power from Dain to Brennan to heal Mira. But I thought he still had a mark on the back of his neck.
That's the one that Violet says she does not see anymore.
Okay, so that one,
the back of the neck specifically.
Okay. Also, another weird point is that Brennan all of a sudden says that he doesn't know a language to translate a journal that Violet knew he was fluent in. And it's not like our girl Violet to just forget or make a mistake on those types of things.
Are you talking about the journal at the beginning when she thinks she's sending him a journal? It's one of the first 6 or whatever.
Yes. And he says, "Oh, I don't know that language." And then Violet's like, "Oh," and it's not like our girl Violet to make a detailed mistake.
Yeah.
Like that. So that's why is he lying? Why is he lying?
The only thing that I'm hesitant on with Brennan is believing that he doesn't want his sister safe specifically. And I almost think, and I'm wondering if your points will help prove this, I almost think that he is fighting the same battle Xaden and Violet are, which is he saw his person change, sacrifice everything. And what if he's not necessarily fighting with the venom, but what if he is trying to save his significant other in that same path, right? Because he's not surprised when Xaden turns.
No, exactly. I totally agree with you. And I think Rebecca Yarros does like an amazing job at this. I don't think Brennan is bad in his core where he's like, I want to harm you and betray you to his sisters. But I do think that it is a slippery slope where we could be put in a position where a betrayal does happen out of his love for Naolin. And the biggest point to me that I do not think was an accident, I do not think that their dad just said this. When their dad has left the work specifically for Violet, flat out says, only trust Mira.
Yes, but at this point in time, Brennan's when he writes this. So when his son is, but you think he knows.
I think he knows. I think he so knows because I also believe the theory is if we tie this in, again, dad had amber eyes and there was a reason their dad was visiting all those aisles. And also in Iron Flame, I went back and checked this because I also did a reread of Iron Flame. In Iron Flame, Violet does make a note that their mom was looking for a cure to the venom. I think their dad could have also been a venom. That explains the eyes. He knows about Brennan being alive. It is interesting.
But if he's a scribe, he wouldn't have wielded. He would have to get power from a dragon. He didn't fly. He took boats. I think they kind of talk about this a little bit in this book. They talk about how essentially Violet came out sickly and he was visiting the Isles, essentially trying to dedicate her or go through these processes to get her to essentially fix her. And it makes her really mad, but he's trying to fix her. And in that process, I think one of the people he dedicates her to or starts to, right, which we learn is Dune. And that's why she starts to get that like white hair. I think that in that process, he learned about the venom. I think he learned too much.
Gotcha. And I could totally see that.
But I could see your point that he knew about Brennan and kind of it went side by side. You know what I mean?
Yes. So that is why I think, again, I don't think that Brennan would actively harm anyone out of malice. I do think it's just the same thing with the relationship, like you said, of Violet and Xaden. If they walk a tight line, are they going to pick the person they're in love with? And something could happen where it does lead to a form of betrayal out of love. Because again, Xaden has said over and over, and their relationship's amazing. So it's the romance of Xaden. He would do anything for Violet. So
yeah, but I also think Xaden doesn't have true brothers at this point. So I do think that they do a very good job of showing the Sorrengails and like their dedication to each other. Cause like then I put it in like Violet's shoes, I think would make more sense, where you think she would do anything for Xaden and to save him, but she would not do anything that would hurt Brennan and Mira. So that's why I think he's got to have a plan. You know what I mean? He's working on something, because he's also not against
on something.
He's also not against taking him out. You know what I mean? So, yeah. But is he protecting one of them? Probably.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But, and then the question though that it poses is, if Asher knows, Lilith didn't, because she did not know Brennan was alive.
I completely agree. Yeah. But I do think their dad knew, but their mother did not know. Yes.
It's interesting to believe that too, because the love we're supposed to believe they have.
So I think that we shall see what happens in book 4 or 5, but I am on the train that something is amiss. And again, I don't think it's going to be out of malice, or I want to harm them like a pan check, like that form of betrayal. But I do think that it opens the door, and there's something shady about Brennan with his past.
Yeah, or he knows more than he's saying.
He knows more than he's letting on. Yes, so that is a big, like, over and over, and I was like, and then when the dad said, only trust Mira, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
You be knowing. Sigale hates Brennan.
And I know
like she cannot stand him. And I know that it's probably tied to the connection to Neolin, and then that being Taryn's previous writer, and everything that happened. But I'm like, okay, Sigale may know what's up. And then Taryn just never talks about Neolin.
You would think the challenge then too, right, is if Berwyn is Taryn's original writer, how did they break that bond? Do we believe that? Because he can't change the magic.
Irids can.
So you think that an Irid changed the magic, but then Taryn would have known where the Irids were.
I mean, that's the only thing I see where you're going. The only thing that they've said that can break a bond to this point, unless I'm wrong, is when the Irids said that they can break a bond between a dragon and a rider. Yeah. That's the only other time I think it's mentioned on how to do so. So I think, because some of my points that I wrote down too, is that they did this kind of like test of Andarna. They're testing if humans have evolved to improve and be less like bloodthirsty. I think that maybe where we could go in book 4 or 5 is that how they previously broke the bond, because they would have had to somehow bring Andarna, right?
It was only a couple years ago, because she's only like 3 in the scheme of things. Mm-hmm. And then the other Irids have been gone hundreds of years. So she's been waiting a long time. I don't think it's possible for the Irids, but I do think the only other thing I can think of is if you reach a certain level of venom, if it does break the bond, because the way they get power is from the dragon and the dragon bond. And I'm wondering because I think Sigale chose to keep Xaden. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how that works, right? And I'm thinking that the only reason that Neolin could have lived would be because he was channeling from the earth. It was all about that power.
Makes sense. I guess it is still a mystery on how the bond was broken between Neolin and Taryn. I do think that obviously he's still alive. I got the sense, but maybe you got a different sense, which is the beauty of reading. I got the sense that the Irids have been kind of watching. So and especially, I'm going to totally butcher his name. I know it starts with Leo. When he comes back later in the book to power up the wards, I feel like they've been like watching. So I don't know that it would be impossible. I don't know that it's happened, but I don't know that it would be impossible that they were involved in everything that happened with Neolin and Taryn and breaking the bonds.
It would make me want to go back and remember what Taryn said, because he does make a comment on the way that I do recall off the top of my head, that he says, like, it might not be the welcome you're hoping.
Very valid point.
Because if we don't know it, because to your point, right, he might not know their location then, but they might have come to him in a situation, because we know, I don't think the Venom would know where they are, because obviously, like, that's a huge threat to them. So it would lead me to believe
It's possible.
It's possible that Taryn knew that they were in existence because he's like, yeah, it's not going to be the family reunion you're thinking, kid, but we'll go find them.
You know what? I know. Because the vibe I got is like, obviously they're really kind of like judgmental and they look down on people and Adarna, and we can talk about that whole scene that's traumatizing. But the vibe that I got is they've done this like tests with her to see if humans have evolved and dragon kind. And so it's like, for me, I totally got the perspective that they haven't been like, okay, we're just going to be completely isolated. We're not going to ever check in. It's almost like I got the vibe they were keeping tabs on if things had changed. So for me, a perspective could form that potentially they were involved in breaking that bond. Maybe.
That's interesting.
Find out.
Another theory that I'm really glad that I think that we can debunk is I was worried towards the end that they were setting us up for a pregnancy trope. Did you have that fear?
Oh, no, but I saw it on TikTok. But I knew that Rebecca Yarros had mentioned in an interview that she has EDS, which it explains the joints and the fatigue and like the being dizzy. She's
mentioned that she knew what it was like to be, I'm trying to think of the right word she used. She essentially said for other people to feel like you're fragile. But no, my fear is kind of like they set up this marriage a lot in the book, which we can get into in a little bit, right? There's a lot of nuggets throughout the whole thing until it happens on marriage, right? Him wanting to marry her, their verbiage not being permanent enough, et cetera, right? In that same tone, there was a ton around heirs, around Bodhi and him not having heirs, around securing this marriage because they need heirs, around how they were going to tee this up, right? And then there was the concept, right, which is they protect against pregnancy through magic, and they spent a significant time out of magic. And so there was the thought of, okay, well, with her being lined up to be essentially Duchess now, is she with heir? Is that how we're going to? Yeah. And Rebecca Yarros on the tour has said, essentially, that is not a good place for children. That she feels stressful. Like if the terms of consent had changed, that it needs to be expressed. So I think she's pretty much debunked that theory, in my opinion.
Gotcha. Okay.
But that was one of my big fears towards the end is, are we going, because you got 2 more books, you know what I mean? Like I can't have you taken out of to just lead, you know what I mean? She's done too much up to this point. So I'm kind of really glad that we've confirmed we're not going that way, because that was a big fear of mine.
I was shocked. I love that you brought this up. I was shocked when I was on TikTok and I saw that theory after reading it, because I was like, oh, I didn't pick up on that at all. The marriage made a lot of sense, like with all the hints and multiple times they bring up marriage. So at the end, I was like, makes sense. They've talked about marriage quite a bit, but I didn't pick up on any pregnancy. The only thing I did pick up on is she said she was super fatigued, which they were traveling a lot. She was super tired. She felt very weak and she was dizzy, and she all those things.
She was nauseous at one point.
Nauseous, all of that, the physiological symptoms I called out on. I was like, oh, when I saw that theory, I was like, oh, are we going for this?
But I will say, when I went back through Onyx Storm the second time, when she feels nauseous, it's like 2 days after they had sex. So it's like,
come
on, you know what I mean? Like it was, they just gotten back. It was like a couple days. So you're like, okay, that's dramatic. It was more towards the very end. Like there was a lot of notes of Taryn like protecting her in the saddle in certain ways. And then there was a comment from Sigale where she says he won't let you approach her in this condition. And then he says, is she hurt? And she said, yes, but she'll live. It was in this condition, like some of those little things.
Gotcha.
But again, there was just a lot of talk about heirs. There was a lot of talk between Bodhi and Xaden about heirs. Between like the different rulers and heirs, it just got brought up a ton. So it did feel like, are we trying to sprinkle in some theories here?
Which I also would be disappointed if it happened in book 4. I would love them to be happy and wonderful and they ride off into the sunset when the war is won and it's safe to do so. But I would be worried about the plot if it happens in book 4.
Yeah. And just how much work she's put into this for her to take a back seat would be, because it's not like she would be center battle then, you know what I mean? And I just don't think that's true to her character at this point.
I completely agree. So I'm also kind of relieved that theory is seemingly debunked. I have a whole other really big theory, but before we go into this big theory, I wanted to do like a light one, a funny one. Oh, this isn't even light and funny, but this is my number 1 note. Okay, in book 4 and 5, are we going to get more about Jacinia? Because something else that caught my eye literally in the beginning is that it's like this work has been faithfully transcribed by Jacinia. And I'm like, it'd be real easy for Jacinia to rewrite some history. She has not shown anything else that I can think of that she'd be traitorous. But I'm like, that's interesting. It's literally at the beginning and it's been faithfully transcribed. I don't know. When I read that, I was like, is there more coming for her and her character in book 4 or 5?
So when I see that, what I see is retrieved correspondence.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I see it as, right, she was a part of this group. She obviously ends up making it big in the scribe quadrant. I think she's proven she, kind of ride or die with them. So I don't think there's any traitorous energy there. It's more that those nuggets actually scared me more are we trying to say Xaden and Violet are going to die at the end?
I kind of low-key, I don't want to break anyone's heart, but that's a low-key fear that I have, and I think it might happen based on my next point, actually. Like, I have evidence to maybe think about this, which I don't want it to happen. Okay, are you ready for this? Okay, so it's like fun, and then we're going to dive into it. Okay,
Is it fun? Am I having fun?
Okay.
Is that what I'm feeling?
Maybe. We'll see. What I'm worried we're going into, and please know Rebecca Yarros, is in book 4 and 5, they win the war. They do all these things. They almost get to like a godlike tier. And then their path is going to be like sacrifice. And there's going to be a new couple that is the balance. And that
Dain
new
and
couple
Sloan.
is... Yes.
I've seen that and it scares the shit out of me. And honestly,
it's like, okay, maybe.
Well, the way they tee up this, right, is you've got a wing leader and an initiate or a cadet.
Because she even says to him, like, oh, you shouldn't have this much power when she's siphoning from him.
I cannot wait to talk about that. We have to talk about that in a little bit. He shouldn't have that much power, right? Mm-hmm. Why?
Why shouldn't he? Why?
So what that tells me is, because, okay, so let's break it down this way, right? She touches him and she's like, wow, you should not have this much power, right? So in my opinion, she is siphoned from even... Lilith, right? Lilith, an extremely powerful wielder. So we know she knows what power feels like, right? She says this. My fear is realistically, right? And again, knowing I've come full circle and I like Dain, okay? Mm-hmm. If we take a step back, outside of being able to read memories, which he does sometimes, right? Mm-hmm. He doesn't wield a lot. He doesn't fight on the mat a lot. And when he does, he's kind of like, even when that Aurora came out and tried to start, he was nervous to wield against her, or at least portrayed he was nervous to wield against her. Mm-hmm. So does Dain have a second signet coming?
I think so.
And if so, why?
I don't know, but I do think that he is. I do think he has a second signet coming. I think we're going to get more on why he has so much power, where that power is coming from. I also think that they might my credence to the theory of, hopefully not, but potentially Xaden and Violet's storyline being one of sacrifice to restore things, them being the new balance. Also because when someone else
shadow wielder
manifests shadows. Yeah, so I kind of feel like, oh, is Rebecca telling us that this whole thing of balance, Xaden and Violet are getting farther and farther away from that? And then also with Sloan being able to siphon power, I'm wondering if she is going to have a bigger role. And if Dain is like super powerful, is he kind of like a beam me up type of thing, where if she can siphon power, is he going to be one that can like give power? And
which I also is what we believe. And I've got a whole thing on that.
Yeah. So I think that, like, okay, I don't know. I don't want to happen with Violet and Xaden, but I do think Dain and Sloan could be the next balance. I love their relationship. Just side note, like, we need to get more. I love it.
God.
So
if I don't get a POV, I'm gonna snap.
Yes.
Like, what did he say to her on that mat? Like, he goes up and says something to her, and she like blushes, and and Violet just says like whatever he said worked. Like, what did you say?
Yeah, exactly. It's like a quote. It's a quote. It's like when she was looking at him, like she either wanted to like stab him or blank, and then Riddick yells out, like,
yeah,
like, 'cause it's like, yes.
And her thought gets cut off. Brilliant.
Yes. Okay. Before we go to your point about Dain and the power and like Violet's powers, because let's get into that. I have another theory just on Sloan before we move on.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about Violet and power in part 2.
Okay.
because I think that's a really big discussion that we can get into for part 2. The last thing I want to say on the Dain Sloan piece is the other thing that Rebecca has notably said is that it's very important to her to know that her books have a happy ending and that they're very important to her. So for me, don't kill him.
Yeah, that would not be a happy ending.
She has also said that somebody asked her on the book tour, hey, this saying retrieved correspondence, does it have meaning? And she was like, I'm not going to get into that, but I mean, yeah, it has meaning. And so I have so much fear. I have so much fear.
That would be traumatizing unless it's like when we get into their power conversation, unless like something happens magically where they we could talk about it more.
They get nullified.
Yeah,
we got a lot to talk about there.
Okay. I have one more point on Sloan, and I think she's going to be a key character in book 4 and 5 because with her power, with the venin, why can't she siphon power from the venin back into the earth? Could she?
I think that's an interesting thought.
Could she do that? Yeah.
And would that be a cure?
Exactly. And then if my thought, and again, I've seen this a little bit online too, but my thought is like, ooh, what if Dain's second signet that we're going to find out about, if she can siphon the power out to the ground, what can he give to then, are they a big part of the cure, I suppose?
And I think it'll tee us up for, which again, we'll talk about in part 2, because I think we're about to wrap up part 1 here. Something to think about, right? Which is if Dain has a second signet, right? It's not coming from the dragon. It's not coming from a relic, because we now know that the rebellion relics, that they all have 2 signets at least, right? Are we talking about the recoming of the Big Six?
I think we are, and I cannot wait to talk about it in part 2. Yes!
Okay. So I think we're going to pause here just because these next topics are so big and we want to spend some time. I've got screenshots. I've got quotes that we need to get into. So yeah, we'll pause this one right here. You heard it here first through the grapevine. If you like what you heard, join us next week. We're going to join in part 2.
Yes. And also check us out on TikTok, Instagram. We also have a YouTube channel where you can find previously listed episodes as well as just some fun bookish content. So please check us out on YouTube and like and subscribe.
Yes, we hope to see you next week. Cheers.
Cheers.